This is the anniversary of a very special event took place in America. The anniversary of the March on Washington and that famous speech given by Martin Luther King, the I Am a Dream speech. We have several of his progeny, children, so forth, they'll be talking today. But that was a moment of great history. Did you happen to watch it? Have you seen clips later?
I haven't seen it yet. I can't wait.
Well, it's a very moving moment, and they had Hollywood stars, Charlton Heston and Burt Lancaster, just a whole bunch of them. They were singing. It was quite an event, seminal moment in civil rights in America, and so we celebrate that today. Well, after days of talking, it looks like the U.S. and its allies could launch a strike on Syria at any time.
That's right. Israel is also getting ready in case Syria retaliates against them, and the tension in the Middle East could hit Americans in the pocketbook. Charlene Israel has that story.
Strong words from the Obama administration as momentum builds in the case against Syria.
There is no doubt who is responsible for this heinous use of chemical weapons in Syria: the Syrian regime.
But still no decision today on how the U.S. will respond. President Obama has positioned military assets in the region, and the Pentagon has identified potential targets, most likely chemical weapons sites and military installations. Now they wait on the president's orders.
We are ready to go.
The White House is consulting with House and Senate leaders, and both President Obama and Vice President Biden have been on the phone with world leaders trying to gain full international support. Key U.S. allies are on board for a military response.
The question now for us is, are we more likely to deter the future use of chemical weapons by acting or not acting?
The Arab League released a statement holding Assad responsible for the attack and called on the UN to respond, but stopped short of calling for military action. The UN is not likely to give its support, but White House officials say Assad's actions pose a direct threat to U.S. national security, giving President Obama potential legal justification for launching a strike without UN authorization. U.S. officials did not detail how the U.S. was directly threatened. Meanwhile, Syria stands by its warning that it will respond to any military strike by using all means.
If Bashar al-Assad didn't hesitate to use chemical weapons against his own sleeping civilians, what's to stop him from using them against sleeping Turks, Jordanians, or Israelis? So that's the nightmare scenario.
Fighting in the Middle East could hit Americans in the pocketbook. The price of oil rose again today above $112. That's going to mean higher prices at the gas pump. Charlene Israel, CBN News.
Thanks, Charlene. Well, we don't want to see war. Nobody wants to see war. I think with Assad, it's a lot of bluff, but he's trying to emulate his father, Hafez al-Assad, who was a brutal dictator. He was brutal. And this guy, who was trained as a doctor, is trying to emulate his father's brutality. But we can't let that attack on his civilians go unanswered. It was just too horrible, and it's incontrovertible evidence that it happened.
So you think the U.S. is doing the right thing by getting involved?
Well, on this one, we have to. We waited too long. If we'd have moved a couple of years ago, we'd have been in a much better position to have controlled the outcome. Now, we're like leading from behind. We're always coming behind because the president isn't a man of action. But it looks like now we're going to see something. I don't know. It'll take more than a few cruise missiles, though. They'll probably have to land troops. They'll have to go after those chemical sites. And
well, when you see those pictures of the people after they've been affected by the, you have to do something.
Heartrending. Actually, the thing that we should do is target Assad. And I saw one column that says Assad is the problem and he ought to be taken out, but he's supported by a coterie of military people who want to keep power. The Alawites are a small sect, and they have held power. They were just sort of like the Ba'ath Party in Iraq. A small coterie of people held power over the population, and he doesn't want to give up that power. And I think he's got a number of generals and people who say, no way, we're going to fight to the end. Well, they may have to. Well, radical Muslims launched a brutal assault on churches in Egypt recently. Lee Webb has that story from the CBN newsroom, and here's Lee.
Pat, the church has suffered its worst attacks in centuries in Egypt over the past 2 weeks alone. Islamic radicalism spurred that violence. But as Chris Mitchell found out, the attacks were met with Christian love.
The city of Minya sits at the epicenter of the persecution against the Christian church. This is the Emir Tadros Church in Minya, just one of the dozens of churches that have been destroyed throughout Egypt. This is a 100-year-old church, and as you can see, it's been completely destroyed on the inside. One Egyptian expert said the violence against the churches in Egypt is the worst in nearly 700 years. This exclusive video, aired for the first time on nationwide TV, shows the inside of the sanctuary is completely gutted and the altar destroyed. Now the church uses this makeshift altar outside, and the pastor explained to us they started holding their services at 6:30 in the morning. Engineers say the church would need to be torn down before it could be rebuilt.
To be sure that everything is burned, they put fire in every place. Before this time, they make a sign for Christian places or cars or houses or buildings, and if the place has an X on it, they burn the place.
The churches weren't the only targets. Schools, cars, and businesses owned by Christians were destroyed. Muslim radicals marked Christian businesses with a black X before torching them. Perhaps most shocking was the destruction of this Christian orphanage. This is a Coptic Christian orphanage called Christ Soldiers. Muslim mobs came in here and they destroyed the building, leaving about 200 children without shelter. But they wanted to leave a message for the attackers, and they wrote it on the wall outside. And it said, "You meant to hurt us, but we forgive you. God is love. Everything works out for good." They also wrote, "Love your enemies." Evangelical ministries bore the brunt of many attacks. This is what remains of the bookstore in Minya of the Bible Society of Egypt. Their store in nearby Eshut was also destroyed.
For the last 130 years, we have been operating. We have bookshops in the streets, in main cities, in Cairo, Alexandria, Tanta, Upper Egypt, and it has never happened in the history of the Bible Society.
According to this Egyptian website, more than 60 churches were attacked from Minya, Alexandria, Giza, Suez, and throughout Egypt. The rampage began after Muslim Brotherhood supporters used the churches as scapegoats for the army's decision to break up 2 Brotherhood protest camps in Cairo. They also blamed the church for participating in the ouster of President Mohamed Morsi. Yet Christians point out many of their Muslim neighbors defended and protected them. They don't see this as a Muslim against Christian issue, but as the Muslim Brotherhood against the Christians. And even though they have been targeted, they are responding with forgiveness and pressing on in the face of persecution.
We respond as every other Christian has responded in Egypt. We are in Egypt to serve. We are in Egypt to demonstrate the Christian love. We do every effort to be self-restrained and to show the Christian love that the Lord has taught us to show.
The churches are asking for prayer and support from the church worldwide.
What happens in Egypt affects the Middle East. So we ask them to pray for the country. We ask them to pray for Christians. We ask them to pray for the Middle East. And we also ask them to pray for the government, for the existing government, that the Lord may give them wisdom, guidance in every decision they make.
While living under threats, they vow to continue their ministries. They say the buildings have been destroyed, but the church goes on. And their faith remains in Jesus Christ, who promised he would build his church. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Minya, Egypt.
Wow, an amazing display of God's grace in Egypt. 50 years ago today, Martin Luther King Jr. delivered one of the most enduring speeches in American history. It was about his dream to see racial equality in America. CBN News sat down with 3 generations of the King family in Atlanta for their thoughts about America 5 decades later. Jennifer Wishon has that story.
I have a dream today.
Those famous words from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on August 28, 1963 will never be forgotten. More than 250,000 people attended the March on Washington. CBN News sat down with 3 generations of the King family women to see if the dream has been realized. Dr. Alveda King is the niece of Martin Luther King Jr.
Many think that this means that the dream has been realized. It has not been realized, but we are on the way.
A new generation of Americans marked the anniversary at the reflecting pool around MLK's tomb in Atlanta. His youngest daughter, Bernice, says God is calling us to carry on that dream.
God is calling all of us to a higher plane, no matter who we are, whether we're black, whether Hispanic, Asian, Native American, white American, whether we're from any country in this world, our destinies are tied together.
Dr. King's sister, Naomi Ruth, actually attended the March on Washington 50 years ago. She says she'll never forget how far we've come as a country.
Just being there and looking out at that sea of people, over 250,000 strong or more, and then looking at that water just brought back to me many of my spiritual values.
Today, the Kings carry on their family legacy and hope the next 50 years will be even more successful.
I no longer am a slave. Christ is risen from the grave. Christ is Lord. I am saved and I'm free.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
A special U.S. envoy will travel to North Korea this week to seek the release of jailed American Christian Kenneth Bae. Bae is a tour operator and Christian missionary. He was arrested last November and accused of hostile acts against the North Korean government. He's serving 15 years of hard labor and said to be in poor health. Robert King, a State Department special envoy for human rights issues, will request a pardon and amnesty for Bae on humanitarian grounds. Eating broccoli could help you avoid getting the most common form of arthritis. Researchers at the University of East Anglia in the UK found that a key compound in broccoli can help slow the spread of osteoarthritis or even prevent it. The compound blocks an enzyme that destroys the cartilage in joints. That compound is also found in vegetables like Brussels sprouts and cabbage. 27 million adults have osteoarthritis, and 50% will get some form of it in their lifetime. Pat?
Wow, I've got something else to add. Dr. Roizen from the Cleveland Clinic was here. He used to do a regular appearance with us. He's a terrific guy. And he said their research at Cleveland Clinic has indicated that broccoli, if a pregnant woman will eat broccoli 3 times a week during her pregnancy, he said it will absolutely immunize her future child against cancer.
Wow.
How about that?
That's incredible.
So,
well, you know, I like to juice my broccoli. I guess you can get the same. Yesterday I juiced it with green apple, and it's delicious.
Same. So when you get ready to have babies, keep that in mind. Always
3
eat
times a week.
3 times a week. Isn't that great? It's a miracle.